Hi, I'm Meshal Malik and you're watching Indus Special. As Kashmiris around the world observe Martyrs' Day, on today's show we explore the history that led to the killing of 22 protesters on July 13, 1931. We discuss with our panel of experts the significance of this day in Kashmir's history and how it connects to the social and political situation in Kashmir today. Joining us for this conversation is Mr. Iftikhar Gilani, who's a senior Kashmiri journalist. He joins us from Ankara. Also joining us today is Professor Nazir Ahmed Shawl, who instituted a think tank along with other activists known as South Asia Center for Peace and Human Rights, of which he is the chairman. He joins us from London. Thank you both for joining us and welcome to the show. Mr. Iftikhar Gilani, let's jump right into it. What is the significance of this day today?
The ironic similarity is that it was on this day, 1779, when French public stormed the Bastille prison in Paris, and this became a turning point of the European history. And 152 years later, on July 13th, 1931, and quite interestingly, it was also a Monday, as it is today, blood-soaked day outside the central jail of Srinagar, symbolized the Kashmiri's national struggle and changed the course of the history in Kashmir. It was very sadly that it is for the first time now since 1947, as Kashmiris in Srinagar have missed this heartbeat, as there was no official function was held to commemorate the martyrs of 1931 on this day. This day, it has almost a similar significance as Jallianwala Bagh for India or for the Punjab. I think for 1 year last, this has been this attempt to rewrite history for vested interests who have actually been targeting this day, as it is targeting this day and labeling these martyrs as writers or the rebellions against Dogras or Hindus. But this day was against the oppression. It was against the suppression. It was a kind of it was a bubble which burst on that day. It was not only that those only 22 people were killed on the outside Srinagar Central Jail. It led a chain of events, and those chain of events there are the martyrs in Anantnag. Quite soon after that, there are martyrs in Sopore. Almost between this 1931-32, there are almost in every town of the Kashmir has this martyrs graveyard where they have martyrs. But this was a symbolic point where actually it triggered a kind of an unrest against the Dogra Maharaja. But Kashmiris, they are facing this oppression, repression, or disempowerment, what may call it. It's not only since 1585 when this Mughal general Bhagwan Singh deceived the last king of Kashmir, Yusuf Shah Chak, and he was exiled and arrested him in Lahore and was exiled to Patna and Bihar, where he died. So this day. This year had a very special significance because this is the one day which cutting across ideological, political lines, whether somebody is the pro-India, whether somebody pro-Pakistan, some pro-independent. Right. This is a kind of a day which is owned by everybody. And this year quite very...
Right, Mr. Gilani, I'll come back to how this connects with what we're seeing unfold in Kashmir today. But before that, I'm going to jump to Professor Nazir Ahmed Shawl and talk to him about the Kashmiri Resistance, which began way before 1947. In fact, 1846, many claim, is the date when it actually began. Professor Shawl, how much do you agree with that was the time when Kashmiri Resistance began with full force?
First of all, let us salute the martyrs of 13th July and all other martyrs who have sacrificed their life, and they have sacrificed that today for the tomorrow of their nation. Before I would delve upon the significance of 13th July, I would like to contextualize the happenings on that day. That event took place in Khankai-Mohalla, Srinagar, where a chef belonged to Amroha, UP, and who was with an English army officer, Major Butt, who who spoke to the people and told them that oppressive machine that operates from these palaces these palaces need to be demolished, because he was very much disturbed by the sufferings of the people of Kashmir. And this convulsion in Kashmir, this political convulsion in Kashmir, has shaped the resistance movement. And I would like to say that Abdul Qadir is the person who spoke out his heart, and he spoke about the suffering of the people of Kashmir, and people had great admiration for that person. He was taken away, he was arrested, and his arrest also was what we call it reverberated in the entire valley, and people became very disturbed. And when he was taken to the court, 4 times he was taken to the court, but ultimately what was decided was that the trial should be held inside the jail. This brought the people who loved him outside the premises of the central jail, and they waited
Professor Nazir Ahmed Shawl, sorry to interject here, but just as you're trying to contextualize this for us, I also want to ask you how much of what Abdul Qadir said at the time and the protesters that surrounded him, how much of that had a religious undertone to it, and how much of that had a class undertone to it?
I would not say that it had religious undertone. I would say that it was a response to the oppression that was being conducted by an autocratic ruler on the people of Kashmir. It is true that that Abdul Qadir was a Muslim, and he had the love for the Muslim Ummah. That is besides the point. Question is that he raised a voice against the oppressive machine. And question is, this is the time when the march for emancipation and for achieving the aspiration of the people of Jammu and Kashmir took an organized shape. And here I would like to remind you that one of the martyrs on that day, when 22 people fell to the bullets of the autocratic ruler, one of them told Sheikh Abdullah, who was the leader of the movement at that point of time, he told him that we have fulfilled our duty. Now it is for you to fulfill the duty. But at this time, as rightly pointed out by Mr. Iftikhar Gilani, we are observing this day in a different atmosphere. Right. After 5th August, there has been a denudation of all the calendars, and wherein this National Day of Kashmir figured, they have removed it. They have removed it from the national calendar.
Professor Nazir Ahmed Shawl, what do you think the purpose of removing this day as a national holiday that has been observed for so many years? What do you think is the purpose of that? And since it's done not subtly, but very obviously, do you think that purpose can be achieved?
In India, there is an ultra-nationalist government in power. And this ultra-nationalist government is trying to polarize India. Regressive and a fascist regime is ruling from the ramparts of Delhi, and they are trying to wipe out the Muslim identity of the state.
Right.
And
Professor Shawl, stay with me, and I'm going to jump to Mr. Iftikhar Gilani and talk to him about this very identity. Mr. Iftikhar Gilani, with our conversation, and I brought this point up previously to Professor Shawl as well, do you think that often the Kashmiri resistance and the struggle is only painted in the light as a religious struggle, and we forget the class elements associated to it, that it's also a struggle against an oppressive economic regime?
See, Meshal, in Kashmir, actually, as a Kashmiri, we have 2 identities. We are a Kashmiris, and we are proud of it. We are Muslims, and we are proud of both our identities. As a Kashmiri, we suffered during the Mughal era, we suffered during the Pathan era, and as a Muslim, we suffered in Dogra era, we suffered in the Sikh era. They're all repressive regimes. Right from I told you that the day of the Raja Bhagwan Singh when he reached to Kashmir, since then Kashmir is being ruled by the governors, Kashmir is ruled by the pygmies. So there is a kind of a disempowerment of Kashmiris of last 462 years now. So in this context, when you mentioned about this 13th of July, it had a context. It had a context of both these identities as a Kashmiri identity, as their Muslim identities. And since this day, it actually is contextualizing in on 29th of April in Jammu, when it was an Eid day, when this Imam of that Eid Imam, the Munshi Ishaq, he was told not to have this Jummah khutbah by the Dogra rulers. And just a week after that, on 15 miles from Jammu in Dogar, this Friday prayers were banned. And again in Samba, there was an Hindu-Muslim issue over some water, and then came a decree that Muslims were barred to take water from the pond. So all these were contextualizing it. And in Jammu, this young man, Muslim League, in Jammu Muslims, they had a kind of an organization. Kashmiri Muslims till then were not so, they didn't have any organization by then. And they decided to protest these measures, and they sent some posters to Srinagar as well, to Kashmir. A young teacher, Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah, who assigned some people, some young persons to paste these posters across the city. So one of the persons was this Muhammad Ismail. He got arrested while pasting these posters. So there was when he was being taken to the police station, the crowd went along with him. And when, along with this Sheikh Abdullah, he was also in the crowd. So when the police, this SHO, he saw the large crowd coming, so he let this man go. But this crowd took him to the Jama Masjid, and this was the first time at the 15,000 people had gathered in the Jama Masjid when Sheikh Abdullah did his first political and public speech. And that was the day one day he became the lead. But because of all these events were going on, this political advisor of this Maharaja, a British, Sir Wakefield, he advised the Maharaja to actually receive a delegation of Muslim youth and hear their complaints. So the message was conveyed to the Muslims of Jammu and Muslim Kashmir also. In Jammu, they formed a 4-member committee. And in Kashmir, it was decided that instead of that just nominating people, let us first have a public gathering. And in public gathering, we'll nominate or elect the 7 people they have been told to elect 7 people, that they will form a delegation along with these 4 people from the Jammu, and will go to the Maharaja and give him a memorandum. So in this, when our other guest, he has actually already mentioned to you that in Khankai Mohalla in Srinagar, this meeting was held, and this meeting that it was decided that Mirwais Yusuf Shah, Mirwais Ahmadullah Hamdani, there's Sheikh Abdullah and some Ghulam Ashai, they were elected. And I think is a history.
Right, Mr. Gilani, as you're talking about this history, let's try to connect it to what we're seeing today. You mentioned, Professor Nazir Ahmed Shawl mentioned how this day is trying to be eliminated from Kashmir's history. You as a journalist must be well aware of the persecution that journalists in Kashmir are facing at this moment. When you connect the events in the past to what is happening now, what do you see?
This is now actually this is an irony. Most of the people, many people, even our friends in the National Conference, our friends in other political parties, when they used to defend the events of 1947 and what the stand of Sheikh Abdullah, the National Conference, we are quite proud of this identity as well. We wanted to prevent and protect this identity also, because we had suffered because of this identity as well in the past. So this was an argument, whether right or wrong, but this was an argument. But now, post August 5, our Kashmiri identity, our language, our culture, our almost everything is at stake. We are being robbed of our Kashmiri identity as well. Maybe not only the Muslim identity, but this Kashmiri identity. The script of our language is being changed. It has been already changed. Urdu, which used to be the official language of the Jammu and Kashmir, is no more an official language. There are many other steps have been taken. This state domicile laws, which the way they are coming up, the way this majority is being turned has a potential to be turned into a minority.
Right.
So both these identities are now at stake.
Right.
A Kashmiri identity as well as a Muslim identity.
Right. Mr. Gilani, stay with me. I'm going to jump to Professor Shawl. Professor Shawl, when we talk about what's happening now, especially with the new domicile laws and how Kashmiri identity is under threat, how Kashmiris are there's an attempt to marginalize the majority here. What do you foresee happening in the future?
First of all, we need to understand the dynamics of the current situation in Kashmir. The dynamics suggest that India is planning to have a demographic change. And it is for this demographic change that they have enacted the new domicile law, and they are pumping in large numbers of people and issuing them the state subject certificates. And this is also this is a big assault on the Kashmiri identity as well as on the Muslim identity. Therefore, we need to understand that the world community at this stage must challenge this unilateral Indian approach, because this is big power syndrome they are trying to exhibit, and they are trying to impose their will in spite of the fact that this is against the international law, this is against the United Nations Charter, this is against the United Nations resolutions, and even the status quo should have continued till the time
Professor Nazir, Ahmed, Shawl, since running short on time, I just want to put this question to you. As you mentioned, the international community needs to recognize how this is a violation of UN conventions, of international law. You yourself, as an activist, as a Kashmiri activist living abroad, what are other activists who aren't yet in Kashmir but who can raise the voice for Kashmir? How are they mobilizing?
They are trying to approach all the intergovernmental forums. They are trying to approach the mechanisms of the United Nations. We have written to the European Union President. We have written to United Nations Human Rights Council President, United Nations Human Rights Commissioner, United Nations Secretary General, and you must have also read in the press that United Nations Secretary General said a number of times that the conflict zones must, in this COVID time, when COVID is also, bringing a lot of destruction in the world, we need to resolve the conflicts. So we are trying to reach out to the different forums wherever this message can go. But so far. We don't want only statements to be issued. We want some concrete action, and we want to see that international preventive diplomacy must come in and try to save humanity in Kashmir.
Right. Mr. Iftikhar, one last question from you. Now, before the domicile laws were introduced, there was this conversation by many experts and analysts living abroad that we don't know if the intent of genocide can be proved. We don't know if this is actual displacement or trying to change the demography of Kashmir. But now, with this law in place, it is a violation, as many experts are saying, of the 4th Geneva Convention. Do you think that the momentum to take action will now increase?
Everything is now on black and everything is now open with these domicile laws. Now everything it's almost now, even in other states of India, if you go by the northeast, if you go by the Goa, if you go by some other hill states, they have very strong domicile laws. And in Kashmir, this domicile law is so weak. Even if the tahsildar, these government officers have been bound if they don't give a domicile certificate within a stipulated time, and they will be fined. There is a lurking danger because I will tell you that many friends of ours, they just see comparing between Palestine and Kashmir and Israel. In Palestine, Israel will never be able to change the demographic character of the Arab countries. The Jews in all over the world are not more than 14 million. 14 million. Every Jew, they start coming to Israel. The Arabs are 400 million. Here the question, it is a reverse situation. We have a definite issue that Kashmir will be annotated by the outsiders and will be relegated to minority. But I want to go back to this 13th July to your previous question. Yes, this 13th July event was not against Hindus, was not against Dogras itself. Even if there has been the salt to the injury that once 13th July has deleted from as a national calendar, October 7, the birthday of the Maharaja Gulab Singh was added to this national calendar. Even if there is a status of the hero of Jammu has to be given to someone, it should be given to the Mia Didu Jamwal, this Baba Jitu, Kesri Singh, Dhanotri Bagmal, Sabz Ali Khan, Shams Ali Khan, Abud Singh or Chaudhry Ghulam Abbas, who fought against invasion, who fought against oppressors, not like these Dogra Rajas, the way 100 years they have ruled Kashmir. In Kashmir, it is the only place in the world where 19 people have been hanged just for the possession of the beef during this period.
Right. There's still left to discuss, but we have unfortunately run out of time. Thank you so much, Mr. Iftikhar Gilani, for joining us from Ankara, Professor Nazir, Ahmed, Shawl for joining us from London. We're going to go for a short break. When we return, we're going to have another topic for you. Stay with us. Welcome back. Genocide is undisputedly the worst crime against humanity. And yet, while governments and international organizations acknowledge the absolute gravity of this crime, has the international community gotten better at preventing and punishing those responsible for genocide? Let's discuss this further. Joining us for this conversation, Mr. San Lwin, who's the co-founder of the Free Rohingya Coalition. He joins us from Frankfurt. Dr. Byron Matarangas, who's a former Greek diplomat and an expert in international law. He joins us from Istanbul. And also Mr. Ranjit Singh Srai, who's the coordinator of Self-Determination Council, the World Sikh Parliament. He joins us from London. Thank you all for joining us and welcome to the show. Dr. Byron Matarangas, I'd like to begin with you. Now, when we talk about international mechanisms evolving and trying to deal with the complex situation, which is genocide, do you think that laws have evolved?
There is a law in the sense that there are rules prohibiting and punishing the crime of genocide. The legal rules existing, mainly the 1948 Convention, United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, is enough for punishing, preventing, and punishing the crime. The matter is that since genocide action comes from the political power of a state, how can you arrest the responsible of the genocide if they are still in power, if they are still in government? This is very difficult. This is almost impossible. This requires the implementation, the application of the United Nations Convention requires that the political power practicing genocide in a certain country be defeated so that you can arrest, so that it is possible to arrest the former members of the government, prime minister, ministers, or head of state who practiced genocide.
Dr. Byron Matarangas, sorry to interject, but here when we're talking about the actual punishing of those who have committed genocide, before that, and when we're talking about the legal definition of how we identify genocide, there seems to be a lot of difficulty in fact, identifying what constitutes as genocide. Am I right?
In the legal point of view, no, there is no confusion. It is very clear that genocide is an act aiming at the physical extermination, at the physical extinction of a human group. This is quite clear. And the human group which is a victim of a genocide is fixed on the criterion of the national origin, racial origin, or religion, on the basis of the
So
religion.
it doesn't include political or social groups. It also doesn't have any mention of a mass amount of individuals having to be killed for it to be considered genocide.
Group, certainly not. Political group may be killed, may be the target of brutal action, unfortunately, in some countries. But the political groups are not. The political group is not the target of a genocide. Coming to the social classes, yes, a social class can be the target of a genocide action if it is linked to any ethnic or racial origin.
Right.
Then in this case, yes.
Dr. Byron Matarangas, please stay with me. I'm going to come back to you, and we're going to try to ask you to break apart this definition for us further. But before that, I want to jump to Mr. San Lwin. Mr. Lwin, now we know that in January, the ICJ claimed that Myanmar's government needs to prevent action that can lead to genocide. They made this claim. But if we talk about how long it took for the international community to come to that conclusion, do you think that they took far too long?
Thanks for having me here. Yeah, it took more than 40 years. Exactly after 42 years, our cases at the International Court of Justice, and it was brought by a tiny small country, Gambia from the Africa. So there are more than 140 countries have signed the Genocide Convention. They have known that, this Burmese government and the military have been committing the gravest international crime, yet they have not done enough to take the action. And whenever, we asked to take them the action through the international court, no one was ready. Only the Gambia, finally they have taken the case. And they have also alternative way to punish the perpetrator through the International Criminal Court or the actor tribunal. They have not done anything, and also they are continuing their business with the regime that has committed the crime of genocide against my people, Rohingya.
Right.
So whenever they have only imposed the sanction against, like, don't come to our country for the vacation, like one or two senior general of the country. This is only what they have done to the gravest international crime. Because of their lack of action, the criminal, the Burmese criminal, there are many other oppressed minority across the world. They are suffering because, the world is not ready to punish the perpetrator.
Mr. Lwin, this issue in itself is a very complex issue. Why isn't there more accountability? But just the fact that it took 40 years to recognize what was happening, which is, of course, now deemed as ethical cleansing, which has led to more than 1 million Rohingyas fleeing Myanmar. Why do you think it took 40 years?
We have been hearing that the United Nations had been saying that this Rohingya minority is the most persecuted minority in the world, but they were saying this since 1992, but they have not taken any action. And also there are the warning from the several human rights group or the several experts that that genocide is going to unfold soon, but they have not taken. Even the UN high official, they know that they can stop this happening, like 2016 clearance operation, or the 2017 that led more than 1 million to the Bangladesh. These violence against the Rohingya have been happening since 1978. Right. It is repeating again and again, but they have no interest. If there is some interest for them, geopolitically or the natural resource or something like that, they will really intervene. But right. In our area, there is nothing. They don't really care, these people are suffering. That is why we are suffering, not only the Rohingya. You see, there are
Mr.
a lot
Lwin,
of people.
Mr. Lwin, stay with me. I'm going to come back to you, but I want to jump to Mr. Ranjit Singh Srai. Mr. Srai, when we're talking about this, does this resonate with you that the international community has such a long delay in actually acknowledging what is happening right in front of their eyes until it gets to the point of mass killings, until it gets to the point of genocide, and then years after, it's always retrospective, discussing what could have been done? Do you see this happening even today?
I completely agree with that analysis. And I think we've already heard from your earlier contributors that there is a rationale. The rationale often is that the states carrying out genocide, or the people leading those states, are still for many, many years, and therefore they will prevent, delay, stop any action, any international action against genocide, which is one of the most heinous crimes on the international criminal statute book. My particular perspective on this is in relation to the genocide of the Sikhs that happened between 1984 and 1995 during the armed conflict phase of the Indo-Sikh conflict. The conflict politically is still unresolved. But specifically about the Sikh genocide in India, I would like to highlight India's position, because I think that's going to be reflective of a lot of the discussion in other places around the world. So India signed up to the Genocide Convention 1948, but interestingly, it took steps to, in effect, nullify that act. So firstly, the Genocide Convention 1948 allows other states to bring cases before the International Court of Justice. But India, when it signed up to the 1948 Convention, entered a reservation saying that it doesn't agree with that, and in effect saying that India itself must agree to any reference to the International Court of Justice in connection with any cases of genocide, which is self-evident. The rationale for that is to allow India to prevent any action at the ICJ. And that's at the international level. At the domestic level as well, the 1948 Convention requires, doesn't request, it requires the signatory states, of which India is a signatory, to adopt into their domestic criminal legislation crime and effective crime prevention measures around genocide, the prevention of genocide, and if it happens, the punishment of genocide. Now, India has studiously avoided bringing such legislation into its domestic criminal law. And it's not literally, you mustn't rely on people like me saying this. When in December 2018, a significant case relating to the genocide of the Sikhs in 1984 did eventually come, because many of you will know that it's been a hugely pathetic effort by the Indian judicial system to bring the perpetrators to justice. But when one of these cases did come up before the Delhi High Court in December 18, the Delhi High Court effectively said, and I can quote, that this was a crime against humanity. And yet there is a gap, there is a deliberate gap in Indian criminal law which prevents the cases being brought as genocide. So in
Mr. Srai, everything that you're saying is so important right now, but since we're running short on time, I want to go back to Dr. Byron Matarangas and talk to him about this. Dr. Matarangas, I said this right at the start, that genocide is the worst crime against humanity. It's recognized all across the board. No country is going to come out and say that it's not. And yet there is no way to actually bring people to justice. You said that the law is clear enough, that there are some legal barriers. What's preventing countries from taking action against those legal barriers?
Well, the law exists, it is true, but it is difficult to apply the law, as I said before, because it is not easy unless the government committing genocide is defeated militarily, and you can go there and arrest them. This was the case in Serbia, in Yugoslavia, dismantled. It was Serbia, when it was defeated militarily, and Slobodan Milosevic was arrested, could be arrested, as long as he was in power, powerful, with his army, his police forces, and so on. It was absolutely impossible to go to Belgrade and arrest him. How can you do it? Another example, and yes, the other participating spoke of India, yes, but another example is the case of Omar al-Bashir in Sudan. Omar al-Bashir was, well, a dictator, and he was accused of committing genocide in detriment of the African tribes in southern Sudan. Southern Sudan has become an independent country, well, not internationally recognized, yes, yet, but it is, these tribes are African tribes, they are not Arabs, and most of these African tribes are Christian. They are not Muslim. You see, they are two differentiations. Anyway, they had a movement independing their independence. Omar Bashir, as a dictator, well, he did nothing. You see, he did nothing. He did absolutely nothing, but he blocked them. He blocked them, and they risked to starve because they had nothing to
Dr. Matarangas, we're running short on time. So just here, do you see there being a revision of all the problems that are related to the prosecution of those responsible for genocide? Do you see that happening in the near future? Because we are seeing a point in our world where there is so much conflict, where there are so many killings, and yet no accountability.
Well, this is the major problem in international community and in international law. In international community, there is no superpower above the sovereign states. The principle, the fundamental principle, the sacred principle in international law and in international community is that states are sovereign. It means that there is no other power above the states. United Nations is an organization of voluntary cooperation among states. United Nations have no power over the sovereign states. And this is the source from where all these difficulties arise.
Right.
You have somebody who commits genocide. It is, everyone knows it. There is no need for evidence, but you cannot attach him.
Right. Dr. Matarangas, thank you so much for your contribution. Thank you for talking to us. I just want to end with Mr. Lwin, when we're talking about all of this and we're talking about the Rohingya Muslims still being persecuted massively, they're still fleeing for their lives. There's so many refugees still trying to find a home to settle down in. What do you see happening for that community? And you, as someone who's outside of Myanmar, how can you help?
We are not I'm the activist, you know. The Rohingya community in diaspora, they can do anything to protect our own community in Myanmar. It is all depend on the international community. And the United Nations is the world's largest organization. They should have done enough to protect these people and bringing these people back from the Bangladesh to Myanmar and to restore their citizenship and, you know, the
but
protection.
That hasn't been done.
And, you know,
right, that hasn't
been done. And also by this international code, they don't have the law enforcement. Of course, you know, ICC can issue the arrest warrant against the perpetrator, and ICJ can have the verdict in 3 years that, you know, these people should be given the citizenship, should be given their land, everything. But who will implement this if the Myanmar is not going to listen to all this? Because just recently they have ordered the provisional measure, but Myanmar is not complying with this at all. So UN Security Council is completely paralyzed. You know, China and Russia.
Right, Mr. Lwin, since I'm short on time, I just want to get one last comment from Mr. Ranjit Singh Srai. Mr. Srai, we're talking about Myanmar, which is, of course, came into a democracy, but we know that the military there has a lot of power to do what it does. When we talk about India, it is a completely democratic state. It's hailed as the largest democracy in the world, but it is acting like a rogue state right now. Do you see in the future that it will have to face any repercussions?
I think there's 2 points I'd like to make very briefly. Firstly, it's very important that the international community has made a statement, has recognized the crime of genocide, has legislated against it, and people who have committed genocide should be called out as such as what's happened to the Sikhs in India. It's a separate matter. This is the second point, of course. It's a separate matter as to enforcing these laws. It's difficult because the mechanism is through the international community, and the UN doesn't have teeth, enforcement action teeth, to go and grab these people and put them on trial unless there's a political will.
Right.
It's the political will that we need, and this is what the international community must develop. And we can play our role by bringing awareness into the international community of who these perpetrators are and calling for international action.
Right, and that's a very, very comment you made there, and I'm going to end it with that the international community, and specifically when we talk about the United Nations, it needs to have teeth to actually do something about the conventions that have been set up, about the international legal architecture that is in place but isn't being enforced. Thank you so much to all our guests for joining us, Mr. San Lwin from Frankfurt, Dr. Byron Matarangas from Istanbul, and Mr. Ranjit Singh Srai from London. Thank you for watching Indus Special. We will see you again tomorrow with more stories. Till then, goodbye and take care.